So just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Doug Clark. I'm an associate professor at the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan here in sunny Saskatoon, or it's going to be sunny. That's good. Anyway, the last thing anyone wants to do is listen to a professor talk on Zoom. So that's why I've asked the panelists to join us here today. I'll let the three of them each talk a little bit more about who they are and what they do. But I want to introduce each of them briefly, and I want to tell you the common element that brings the three of them together. So Joseph Haluksit is an Inuvialuit elder from Ulahaktuk in the Northwest Territories. If anyone joining online has trouble finding Ulahaktuk, it used to be known as Holman, but the traditional name is what's used now. I'm very, very pleased that Joseph is joining us today. Erica Gillis and Cyril Fredlund are joining us from Churchill, Manitoba, the polar bear capital of the world. Erica is the science manager for the Churchill Northern Study Center, which is an independent nonprofit research and education organization in Churchill that has a more than 40-year track record. I also want to give a shout out to Erica because in the Arctic science community, she is a bit of a hero. With the COVID pandemic restrictions in Canada, just about all Arctic research conducted by Southern-based researchers stopped. And it was only where projects had Northern partners or people on the ground who were able to carry on and collect data that some of those projects continued. So Erica deserves a pretty serious shout out from me for helping a whole lot of researchers keep things going up in Churchill. Cyril Fredlund is a trapper and lifelong Northerner who lives in Churchill. Cyril was born in Inuit Nanungat, the Inuit homeland, and grew up immersed in Inuit culture. Cyril also is the guy that taught me how to build an igloo. I still can't do it particularly well, but I sure had a good instructor. So with that, the common element that brings these three folks together is that they're all from and in communities that I'm working with at the moment on projects that involve remote cameras, a pretty prominent piece of conservation technology worldwide. And most of my research program involves working with communities and locally based organizations in Northern Canada. And what's going on is that we have a project to bring conservation technology into Northerners' hands. And what we've been doing for the past couple of years is giving people in the North remote cameras in two communities where grizzly bears are a new animal on the landscape that people are curious about, and local people are always typically very, very interested in what's going on in the environment around them in Northern Canadian communities. So this is a project to really empower Northerners and to empower Northern communities to take a more active role in wildlife monitoring and management. The Inuvialuit Game Council invited me to work with the community of Ulahaktuk, which is where I've got to know Joseph and many other great people in that very friendly community. Churchill is a community that I lived in years ago and got to know a lot of people. I'm very, very happy to still be welcomed back to work on projects with people. So with that, Joseph, maybe you could say a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Joseph Haluksit. I am a chair for Hunts and Trappers Committee. It organizes the wildlife of Inuvialuit beneficiaries and hunters. I've been on the HTC off and on. This is my second year here now. And I'm interested in the camera that in the past we didn't really think of anything much about what's going on in the hunting areas, but now we start getting more grizzly bears and half-breed, whatever, polar bear that's moving around more, and they go to our camps. So, and I'd just like to hear from you people and how to do research. I think that doing research is really good to have the hunters and trappers, the committees that you're working for, to be on board. So I'm glad to be on here today. Thank you.
Go on, Joseph. Erica, is there anything you'd like to add to introduce yourself?
I don't think so. I think you gave me a very lovely shout out there, Doug. I don't know if I'd call myself a hero. I call myself a glorified middleman, just because I'm the person that's here. But yeah, I've been in Churchill for 2 years now, so I'm also relatively new to living in northern communities, but fell in love with it pretty quickly, and really have enjoyed working on projects that connect to the community, to not only the Churchill Northern Study Center, but even beyond to the broader academic community. So that's kind of what perspective I'll be bringing today, and the lessons that I've learned from being here for 2 years now. So yeah, I really look forward to hearing from everyone this morning or this afternoon or wherever you are.
Great, thank you, Erica. Cyril, anything you'd like to add to introduce yourself to everybody?
I guess a little bit of history. First of all, I'm coming to 40 years living in Churchill, and I was also here as a little boy for a couple of years. But I was born 100 miles inland from Outfit, and lived in that area for the first couple of years of my life. I've also lived in Chesterfield Inlet, it's called Igloo de Gallo, and lived in Whale Cove, it's also called Tikaalya. And so I know the area quite well. I keep in touch with people up and down the coast because they're friends and family to me.
Great, thank you, Cyril. So I'll start with a question for Joseph, and after Joseph has answered, if Erica or Cyril you'd like to add anything, please do. So Joseph, how do you think researchers and wildlife conservationists should get started working with communities, especially if they have not done it before? What's a good way for them to start?
A good way to start is working with the hunters and trappers who's really involved in the project. We have different organizations that we have in the community, so it's always good to go to the right group and work with them. And I see that it's a really good working relationship when we work with the community. And get to know the organization and work with the community, and you find out that communities get quite involved in it. They got to be involved in the projects. That's how I see it.
Guana, yeah, I know Ulahuktuk has seen an awful lot of researchers in many different disciplines, and some big conservation organizations come and work with people in your community.
Yeah. Even though this winter, this summer, from 2000, we didn't have anything planned, but because we had people working with the researchers, that we continue on working with them, even though we didn't have anybody from their side. So it was good to work with them on the phone, and because it's pretty hard to have face-to-face meetings.
Yeah, face-to-face has got much harder. So knowing people and knowing who you can talk to is pretty important. Erica or Cyril, is there anything you'd like to add to what Joseph said?
For my part, Doug, things that Joseph is talking about, I'm familiar with that because in Whale Cove, where I lived the longest growing up, I saw people come and go, and that thing about getting to know the people in the community before you start. If you come jumping in and just announce you're going to do a project and haven't talked to the people ahead of time, it has made some bad feelings that have sometimes lasted, where people felt that they weren't included. So to be able to go in and voice your desires and intentions and get permissions from the local elders and the local organizations, and try to involve as many people as you can from the community, so that they are a part of it, and meeting their interests is very, very important.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to something that I've learned since coming to Churchill, is that it's really important to be accessible in multiple ways to community members. How we communicate with each other in an academic setting or in the research world is very different than how you're going to communicate with the community. So, you know, be accessible online, be not just on email, but on Facebook. Encourage people to text your personal cell phone, or even, you know, show up for a coffee or a tea or a casual chat in the grocery store lineup or a softball game. So I think that's something in the academic world that is maybe a little bit more foreign, especially if you're just getting started with working with communities. It's really important to be accessible, so anyone in the community feels comfortable reaching out to you, and they can do that without any trouble at all.
Thank you, Erica. So you made a great point there about being accessible in so many ways, and social media has made it so much easier for a whole lot of people. Once upon a time, before social media, I used to just hang out in coffee shops and try and do things that way, and that worked. But social media allows, particularly now, connection at a distance. So thanks for mentioning that. A question for you to carry on, Erica. What can locally based research partners contribute to conservation projects?
Yeah, that's I guess pretty much what I do is the locally based person. So I mentioned it earlier, I think of myself as a glorified middleman because I have some skills, but most of my skills lie in that I'm just here in Churchill, and I'm the boots on the ground person. So in my role as the research manager here, I connect researchers with people in the community. So people from all over the world that are interested in coming to Churchill to conduct their research. You know, we have long-standing researchers like you, Doug, that have been coming for decades, but some people are brand new to conducting research, not only in Churchill, but in the north. So, you know, establishing a context for them so they know what they're getting themselves into, and you know, maybe through those conversations we decide that they might not need to come to Churchill at all, like filtering out people that don't have the community's interest in mind, but also in the same way trying to work with them to connect them with community members that are going to ultimately help their project. So, you know, that could be hiring a local bear guard or a boat driver, or connecting them with traditional knowledge holders that know more about the area than I ever possibly could. So I think that's a huge benefit to having a locally based researcher here, is just being the middle person and facilitating communication between both the community and the researchers. So in the same way, you know, from the researchers to me, from the community up, I get to be a familiar face in the community. You know, as I said, I'm pretty new, but my predecessor has been in the community of Churchill for 20 years. So, you know, you get known as the science person or the study center person. So people over time will come to you with science or conservation related questions, and you can work with them or connect them with researchers from the other direction as well. So I think that's very important. And as you said, Doug, just being here as a local has really helped, especially with COVID-19, being able to keep those projects going, not just here, but across the Arctic. We see researchers that have put in the time and the effort and the resources into training locals and training community members on their projects. They've seen the rewards from that this year because they were able to keep those projects going and will keep those projects going into the future because they've done that work and they've made it a priority for them to involve the community. So definitely important to have locally based research partners, especially in the world that we live in today.
Can I ask a question? So Erica, it sounds like you're the knowledge broker, relationship broker that's almost protecting the Churchill and the communities from time being wasted and people who aren't necessarily a good fit with the objectives of what the community wants to achieve as well. Sounds like that's a really crucial element for success here. Do you think that, I guess I've got two questions. Do you think, is that true? Is that a model that other projects or communities should be looking at to help improve the interface between conservation and the community and the tech industry as well to kind of manage those projects? And from the community's perspective, Joseph and Cyril, I'm interested to understand how you perceive it from your sides. Is that a useful role to have that kind of person channeling things through?
Yeah, I wouldn't presume that I would am the gatekeeper to research in Churchill. You know, I act as the initial contact point in Churchill. As being the polar bear capital of the world, we get a lot of different people that are interested in coming for a lot of different reasons. So it's a continual conversation with the researchers to try to figure out how to conduct their research in the best possible way. And you know, it is kind of rare that you get a random person that's just interested in coming to Churchill. And most of the research inquiries that we get are actually pretty useful. It's just those random ones that you kind of have to filter out. And but it isn't my role at all to say what the community wants or needs.
Sorry, I was thinking from the perspective of working with a lot of tech companies that just might have different objectives to the conservation partners we work with. So having that, not gatekeeper, but almost the filter, the helpful filter, I think.
Yeah, and redirecting them to organizations in town that are more suited to help them. You know, we are an independent nonprofit research station. So some people that, you know, might be coming to Churchill, we get a lot of film crews up here. We get a lot of people that are interested in other science in more of a technical role. So we have a couple other organizations in town that are probably better suited to help them. So direct them in that way.
Cool. Doug, I'll throw it back to you. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in and just out of curiosity.
Oh, no, thank you. That's a great question. I would just add one other dimension to that is that in the 3 territories in Canada, there are research licensing processes mandated under territorial law. And those licensing processes require you to work with an organ or have your research proposal reviewed and approved by organizations like the Hunters and Trappers Committee that Joseph represents. But outside of places that have that kind of formal mechanism, then yeah, some communities may be fortunate enough to have an organization that can act as a middleman. And Erica, I think that term probably does not do justice to how much your organization has come to do in the community. But yeah, many communities don't have access to anything like that at all, and just have to, you know, do the best they can. So it's a highly varied context out there.
The thought that I have listening to Erica is the importance of being creative, in having good communication, because it reflects on the organization that you represent as you come into a community. And if you do very well at the communication, even if you stumble a bit in some of your efforts, the fact that you're considerate of people, you're asking permissions and stuff like that, people have a more favorable view of who you work for. And even if it's other people who come behind you, you make a good path for them to come in on.
Absolutely. So to Cyril, here's a question for you, and Erica and Joseph can weigh in on this as well. How can a conservationist or a scientist find out what matters to a community and identify shared interests?
As I think about the question, I mentioned earlier about getting to know the people in a community, and to be able to ask people's opinions, to get their viewpoint on what matters, and to listen to them. And I know everybody likes a good story, and I have a story in my mind that comes from Whale Cove, my hometown, of it's a grizzly bear matter. You mentioned the grizzly bears, and there's an elder. He may have passed on now, but this is probably about 30 years ago that him and his wife went and set up camp at the mouth of a river that's about 30 miles from the community. And I know the land very well there. So when he, in his travels, because it was springtime and they were setting up to be there for a while, he discovered a grizzly bear that was about 50 miles from his camp, or 70 miles from his camp. And the way the lay of the land was, he came back and he got hold of conservation in Rankin Inlet and said, there's a grizzly bear that's on its way to my camp. It's eventually going to come to my camp, and when it does, I will be shooting it. And they said, if you shoot it, we will charge you. And they did nothing. They did not check it out. They just told him, you're not allowed to shoot it. Well, about a couple of weeks later, he got hold of them again, and he said, the bear is about 40 miles from the camp, and when it gets to my camp, I will be shooting it. And they gave him the same warning again. And a couple weeks later, he got hold of them and said, the bear came to my camp and I had to shoot it because it was going to tear my camp apart. The fact that this elder knew from the lay of the land, he knew the habits of the bear, he could tell conservation, this is what's going to happen. And it ended up as he had said it would. As far as I know, he never did get charged, because it gets to that point of protecting his camp. But the fact that conservation didn't do anything, and living in Churchill and seeing what they have done with the bears here, they could have relocated the bear quite easily. It would have been a little bit of a cost, but knowing the nature of grizzly bears, and my opinion of it is they are totally aggressive. That when somebody like an elder says, I need this done, to be able to stay peaceful within the community and within the conservation viewpoint, it really helps if they will listen to the elder and try to work with him. In this case, they didn't, and I don't know what the fallout of it was long term, but that story comes to mind to reinforce the knowledge that local elders have, and to work with them as much as possible. Well, that would make a big difference in the community if you know you've got somebody who will listen and actually do some action to help out.
Thanks, Cyril. That's a great story. Joseph or Erica, is there anything else you'd like to add about listening and understanding what communities want to see happen and bigger they need to see happen?
I think communities need to see more research happening, especially on grizzly bears. Our island, Victoria Island that we live in, didn't have any grizzly bear in the past. They started coming around about 30 years ago now, and they're growing quite fast, and we have those, we call them half-breed, half grizzly, half polar bear. You see that the grizzly bears are really aggressive, but those half-breeds are more aggressive. A few years ago, one of the hunters from here was tracking a half-breed and half-grizzly, and going into town, he was breaking every cabin door, breaking it in, and when the hunter caught up to it, that grizzly bear was hiding on the one side of the cabin, and as soon as he seen the hunter, he was running towards him, so he had to shoot it right there. And our researchers, like our organizations, we always tell our hunters that you see a half-breed, shoot it, or you see a grizzly bear, shoot it. So we let them do that all the time. We try not to let the grizzly bear go there, grow, the population grow. So we try to keep it down, and so we always tell our hunters that if you see a grizzly, shoot it down. And cause it's scary nowadays that when you go camping, you have to really watch out for them. They know how to sneak pretty easy, and smart sneakers.
Kwana Joseph, one thing about both Churchill and Ulahaktuk is that a lot's changing on the land very rapidly. And, for me being down here and just visiting places periodically, it's really important to listen to elders and hunters about what's going on the land, because it's got immediate survival value for you. It's what those folks said about listening, that's the bottom line. So is there anything, are there any final words of advice that any of our three panelists have? Steph, it looks like you wanted to say something.
We're pretty fluid about timing, so I really would be actually quite interested to hear the other question that you had up your sleeve.
Okay, sure, we can do that, and I'm glad we got some flexibility there. So on Twitter a little while ago, on social media, a lot of conservation researchers started writing and posting pictures of damage to remote cameras that they had put out and other field equipment. What do science, this is a question for Joseph or Cyril or Erica, any of the three of you, what do researchers need to do to ensure that equipment that they put out in the field doesn't get vandalized in the first place?
My thoughts on it, Doug, is first of all, set up more than one camera. And I know the cameras that you have been handing out for us to put up are the large box type camera that straps to a tree trunk. And you put that one up, of course, so that they know there's a camera, and you can probably expect them to do something to it. But with the technology we have today, it would be possible to hide 1, 2, 3 cameras in different spots that are much smaller and not visible, that basically are aimed on your main camera. You can see who does what to it and be able to address whether they're somebody who's just making trouble, somebody who's trying to steal something, or if they have an issue that you can go talk to them about, that you can address the person directly and maybe get them on board instead of having them upset the research.
I was interested to hear from, I've got a couple of questions. We've got a couple of questions coming through from the participants, but we also have some other questions that people were asking as they were joining as well. And one of the questions I had was, I was wondering if you, so the panel we have here is, has been brought together by Doug because it's a great example of you've all been collaborating successfully on using technology in conservation and in research. And I was wondering if you could think through and share with if you've seen anything go wrong, or what is it that you've got right and you've seen others get wrong? What do you wish you knew, other people knew, if they were trying to work with communities or trying to use technology effectively with in research in the field? What sort of advice would you give? What are the common issues that you see? Erica, you're nodding. Do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I was just going to say, with this project in particular, the grizzly bear project, and getting cameras out to community members, we've been really lucky because we've had Doug, who's been a part of the Churchill and the Churchill research community for so many years. You know, it takes a lot of time to build those relationships, and we're really lucky that Doug has been so committed to involving the community for so long. So I think, you know, as a word of advice, like, it takes time, and it often happens in a timeline different from yours. So, you know, if you're an academic and you're doing a 2-year master's program or a 4-year PhD, sometimes to get any useful information, it's going to take a lot longer to build those relationships, and that's okay. Just really pushing the expectations of the academic timeline, to make sure that you're, you know, meaningfully engaging with the community. And a really great example of that, like thinking about our grizzly project here, is Doug's master's student Katie, who's conducting interviews with community members. And originally we were thinking about starting some interviews in the early summer months, but that also happens to be the goose hunt in Churchill, and you're not going to find anyone willing to talk to you because everyone's out on the land hunting. So if Doug hadn't known about that, or if, you know, there wasn't as strong of a connection with the community, you might have planned your entire field season and your entire interviews and workshops in May and June, when in reality that's a pretty terrible time to try to get a hold of anyone that knows anything about the land, because they're on the land. So taking the time to really get to know the community is important, and will ultimately give you better data.
Cyril, did you have some thoughts?
Oh
no, sorry, Joseph.
Yeah, I think it's good to have those cameras in the cabins, camps, where we camp every year, because we like to see, like, when we go check them. We check them about, I don't know how many times a year, and we know that the grizzly bears hiding around. We see them once in a while in the cameras, and it's good to have them, because you know, sometimes we have to just see cameras, huts moving around in the camera, just to watch. It's good to see that, you know, not only humans stay in those camps, there's different animals that more like grizzly bears and half-breeds. Those ones walk around and move around in the camp area. So, and I'd like to see more cameras set in each camp, and see that what's going traveling through them.
Cyril, did you have any perspectives on things you've seen go right and go wrong, and lessons what you guys are doing differently to what other less successful people and projects are doing? Cyril?
No, me? Okay.
Yep, sorry.
Hello?
I thought you were talking to Joe. It seems to be that the whole thing with the cameras is a very good move, because people who have put the cameras in their camps, we talked a little bit before about my brother's trap line is 100 miles outside of Churchill, and he puts a camera at his cabin for the summer when he can't get in there, and then picks up the pictures in the fall. He gets to see what kind of wildlife comes by his place. It's far enough out, there's no people that come through, but you get some incredible shots of actually what's interested. And animals are curious as to the strange smells that are around people's cabins. And of course, there'll be all kinds of things from food that's been cooked to animals that have been caught and processed, and vehicle smells and things like that. So it is a bit of an attractant, but it also tells you what's in the land and what's coming around. So the better the cameras are, and the longer they can last, the better pictures they can take, both daytime and nighttime. It's very well worth it. I was on a goose hunting trip a couple of years ago where we went to the coast of the Hudson Bay, southeast of Churchill, and they have cameras down there. And we were going through the pictures and showed all kinds of bears, wolves, foxes, things like that. That noise was my phone here on my hotspot. And interesting to see how often the same ones came back and what they did when they were there. So the cameras are very, very important, and also very interesting. All kinds of information that you can get just by monitoring them and even cataloging what's happened. You get to recognize certain animals by certain marks they may have, or scars, or even just an appearance. You get to recognize a common visitor at different places. Another thing I wanted to mention about working with people, and this goes back more when I was a kid, that I saw people come in that had a level of arrogance as to they are the educated ones, and they're coming to help us uneducated people with something that we don't know how to handle. And that did not go over well. In the years since, like especially here in Churchill with researchers coming in, it's nice to see where you feel like you can talk on level ground, even though the person you're talking to has degrees in education and knowledge, that each of you has your area of knowledge that you're good at, and you're in an attitude of sharing, not in an attitude of giving yourself as being more important than them, that you have all the answers, that to come in there with a common goal, and to work out what you want to accomplish and what each person can do to be a part of it. Because each of us has skills, each of us has knowledge, and we can all work together if we keep the right attitude.
That segues quite nicely into our first question from Tom. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so just to introduce myself, I'm Tom from a sort of very small startup working with conservation programs in a few different locations, mainly marine megafauna, but yeah, just kind of lurking here to get perspectives on what you guys are all seeing in the field, and particularly interested in one thing that we're quite conscious of when we're looking for programs to work with is how we can make sure that us as a technology partner are able to provide something sustainable for the project. And yeah, I guess I'd be interested in perspectives of any of the panelists, if you had any experience with selecting tech, whether that's hardware or software partners for your projects, and whether you've got any thoughts on, yeah, especially with the community aspect, that kind of sustainability, you know, something that can be handed over perhaps to the community. Yeah, any thoughts on that kind of thing, really?
I guess I could speak to it first, just in terms of our camera trapping project specifically. Doug knows all about the cameras, but it did take quite a bit of trial and error, from what I understand, on his part to find what cameras work best, not just for handing it over to community members, but in the climate here. Obviously, it's quite cold, and there's a lot of other barriers outside of the technology that you can't control, like the cameras being ripped down by polar bears. So it took some trial and error on Doug's part to figure out how to perfect that system. And then when he kind of refined it to what we now use today, that's a really easy package to hand over to community members, and making it as easy as possible for them. Once you hand it over, it's a pretty simple camera setup. It's not too hard to get going at all. The biggest barrier is actually, getting the cameras. And I guess just to speak from my perspective as well, being the person with all the cameras in the back of our lab here, another big benefit is just being here to, I get a text from a trapper or a hunter who wants a camera, and I can just drop it off at their house right away after work. So that's another big benefit, is just being, again, accessible to actually be able to hand it over.
Erica, if I can add just a little bit, you're giving me way too much credit. We got lucky at the very beginning with our setup. The cameras we use are Reconics. They're the professional grade ones. And I did a little bit of looking around, and they seemed like the best option. The project originally started a little over 10 years ago now, actually, with Wapask National Park, southeast of Churchill, having some questions about polar bears at their camps, and inviting me to get involved. So my trial and error was spending a couple of weeks at Broad River with Sheldon Kowalchuk, the resource conservation manager, and mostly we were just trying to figure out how to set up, how to do the physical setup, and then we just crossed our fingers. And then the next year it was like, oh wow, the camera survived and we got data. And so we got really lucky by finding a setup that worked and was user-friendly and reliable in those kinds of environments. And I'm not sufficiently tech savvy or plugged into partners like you, Tom, that I can say, hey, we want to do this. Can you build us something? I had to rely on off the shelf. And to provide a bit of perspective, my first experience with remote cameras was 25 years ago with Stefan Himmer on his grizzly bear research project on the Etnarco River, where we rafted down the river and had to change the film on remote cameras that he built themselves. And those cameras, a lot of limitations there. So having technology on the shelf that is reliable and easy to use makes it much more possible for more people to get involved. If it had required building my own cameras and designing and doing that kind of level of investment, I probably would have taken an entirely different approach to the project way back when, and it wouldn't have led here.
That's really interesting. Thanks, guys.
I was just going to ask if Joseph or Cyril had any perspectives on the question that Tom was asking.
Yeah, I'd like to see more cameras put in the camps. With climate change, you never know what's going to go by the camps anymore. It's like probably here in our island, there's getting more polar bears that move around in the summer, and winter now caught up. There's hardly any more ice around, and traveling by land. And we'd like to see more cameras put in the camps where people go camping in the summertime and they stay home in the winter. because they couldn't find out going to camps.
If I can add something.
yeah,
Sorry,
for
Cyril,
myself,
go ahead.
Yeah, for myself, I'm in a supportive role in the work that I do here in Churchill, where I'm getting to know the scientific people who are bringing in the technology for what they're trying to do. So I don't get to choose the actual technology, but I'm in a supportive role as to how do we make that technology work and work out the problems. And when it comes to ideas for myself, I rely fairly heavily on Google, and I'll just come up with keywords that I can research and just follow them exhaustively if I can to see what's out there and to help educate myself as to what we can use, and then to find others who can improve on it or help to put it into good use. So that's where I come from in the use of technology.
Robin, did you want to jump in and ask your question?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Not Robin. Hi, sorry, go on.
Wrong one?
Your name's different. I didn't realize it was you. I'm sorry.
No worries. Yeah, thank you very much for this great insight in this Nordic situation. Over here, we have quite the opposite situation, where the larger amount of camera traps is in the hand of the hunters. So we maybe have 200,000 camera traps in Austria, just in the hands of hunters, and maybe a couple of hundreds in the hands of researchers. And to connect to hunters in a trustful way would open up so much more information for us. So it's really the opposite way over here. And I think it's really interesting on how you build up trust over there. So I'm also interested in how you share the data of the camera traps. So are the other hunters also able to see the data, or what type of information do they get? What about the GPS information? Do people know where these pictures were taken? And is it a problem for hunters in other camps? So these are my questions that I was wondering.
Thanks, Robin. Maybe I can speak to that, and then others can add in if they think I've missed something. But the context that Joseph and Cyril have described are very remote areas, and when people talk about their camps or their trapline cabins, these are kilometers, or in some cases hundreds of kilometers apart, and there's no human settlement in between. Hunting up there is typically of animals that do not get patterned in small areas like Western Europe, or farther south in North America, like around me in Saskatchewan, and that is a different social context. There are some people, my colleague Ryan Brook, for example, who have done an awful lot of work with local hunters in much more densely populated areas, and they've shared a lot of their images, particularly on wild boar, to help understand wild boar distribution as they expand their range on the Canadian prairies. But on this larger question of data, I don't share the data that Cyril or Joseph and the cameras that are in their communities and in the project that Erica administers. I don't share that data because we started out right from the beginning with the principle that the data belonged to the person who are using the camera and putting it out. And in the case of the Ulahaktuk Hunters and Trappers Committee, I gave them the cameras. They are theirs to do with as they wish, and the data is theirs. So, if Cyril or his brother get an awesome photo of you know, polar bear or something going on, and you know, they decide they want to sell T-shirts of it. Hey, fly at it. You know, it's theirs primarily, and I just ask that they share the images of bears with me, and I don't need to see images of people and other things going on, but you know, share the relevant images with me, so that we can do something useful on the research front. In some cases this is a little more formal, and in some cases this is a little less formal. Data sharing is as you pointed out, is an incredibly important, and data management is an incredibly important responsibility. And frankly, this is the thing that I worry about the most in this work is, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing? What is the right thing in terms of the data that we generate? I'm working with some other collaborators, including Wapask National Park, on a Zooniverse project that's going to, you know, hopefully you'll be seeing and participating in soon, on 10 years of remote camera data from camps inside Wapask National Park. We stripped out all the photos of people, and those, you know, that project is really how we got our start. But this new era of having community members deploy cameras themselves, the data is theirs, and that's where we start from, and it's a whole different way of doing basically everything.
Thank you very much.
That's a good point that you made, Doug. I'm thinking of whoever is in charge of the research. In my position here, there will be people that will be producing papers on their research. And if you know who it is that is doing that research, you would be able to contact them, express your interest, and ask them for a copy of their paper once they have done their research and produced their document on what their research has found out. I know they would be very glad to share that information. So I would say get hold of the person who's doing the research and express your interest and establish your contact with them.
Yeah, bringing back the findings is so critical. That's something I heard when I lived in the north, and yeah, it's just been reinforced all along, and it's a universal principle. People want to know, especially if the data might contain them.
Before we move on from this question, I just had one more thing to add about the data sharing, and I guess more of like the logistics of it from my end. We do a simple like memory card swap here, where I hand them a blank one and they hand me a full one, recognizing that the pictures that are on that memory card is theirs, it's their data. They choose to share it with us. But Doug and I have also been discussing, you know, ways that you know, doesn't need to happen in that way. So a great example is, you know, memory cards. A lot of computers these days don't actually have the SD card slots for them. So we'll be purchasing, what do you call them? Like the memory card adapters that you can just plug into your
Card
phone.
readers.
Card readers, yeah. So so for either iPhones or Android, so that you know, when you're actually out on the land, you can check your photos right then and there, and then, you know, either email them or text them or send them to us or whoever you want to share them with, as opposed to having to do the whole card swap. So yeah, just finding another way to make it easy for the camera holders to actually not only access their photos, but share their data how they want.
Maybe I could add to what I think is, you know, whoever gives those cameras to like hunters and trappers, those trappers or the hunters, it would be good if they get the information back to the ones that put the cameras out for them.
Yeah, that's absolutely important, Joseph. I agree. We've only had up your way. We've only had the camera cards that Gary pulled from when he went south to that site. I haven't even seen whether, what's shown up on the cameras at Haluksit yet. But yeah, the HTO is kind of like they do the same thing Erica does. They do the HTC. The HTC does the organizing and handling of all that stuff.
I'm aware we're on
we haven't.
Sorry, Joseph, go on.
We haven't been to. Oh, we haven't been to Haluksit yet this year, so probably when it gets warmer. Yeah.
Yeah, Bessie told me the weather had prevented people from getting to some of those places, so I hope you can get out there soon.
Yeah, I hope so too, yeah.
Okay, I'm aware we're on the hour. We have one final question before we wrap up. Is that okay with everyone?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Yoko has a question. They don't have a mic, so I'm going to ask it for them. How would you deal with, despite the community having accepted the project, having the equipment being destroyed? Do you think paying the community would be a good ethical option? I think this was brought up during registration as well. This question of where is it? Whether there's a role of like financial incentives in conservation tech and research projects to support community involvement. Do you think that's a path that we should be going down, or is there a role to play within these relationships, or is that, opinions?
Are you talking about the community paying back for the damages?
No, I think it's actually, I'm not sure. Yoko, please feel free to jump in. I think it was more the other way around. Paying for the protection of the equipment, or paying for their
you like paying somebody to guard it, or
well, I think, I'm not quite sure.
I'm thinking that if the community has an ownership in the equipment that's being used, so that it comes back as a benefit to the community, get the community on board, that it's positive for the community, like whatever comes out of this research, that they're doing better as a community, whether it's better hunting, better fishing, better safety, whatever it is, that it's a plus for the community. Now you've got the community to buy in on what's being done, and then you get more participation, so that if somebody does go and destroy the cameras, somebody's going to come up and say, I know who did that, or even talk to them and say, don't touch it because it's important to us. I would make that point.
Yeah, I would do the same thing again.
Yeah, absolutely. Having local ownership, and that happens when local people see benefits to having that work done and to being part of it, and it is completely legitimate for financial benefits to be part of that. The specifics are going to be different in different places, and that's to be expected. But yeah, I've got no problem with that.
All right. I just want to say thanks to all the panelists. Do you have, I'd like to give you all the opportunity to share some final thoughts, final takeaways before we wrap up. Joseph, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with us, and key takeaways?
Maybe after a while. Maybe I can go later on.
Okay, Cyril, do you want to go?
One final thought. It makes me think of the times that I've camped out with people, and Joseph may understand this one. We're lying there in the dark and people aren't getting to sleep, and somebody says, and the storytelling starts until we all go to sleep. And these projects, the cameras, things that are happening around, we start telling the stories. So as we share the things that we're involved in the research, it makes great stories as well as helps you remember what has happened and to be able to pass information around. So that's my final thought. At the end of the day, when you're in the dark, waiting to go to sleep, tell the stories.
Wonderful. Erica, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really grateful to have been given the opportunity to speak today. I'm, as I mentioned, like relatively new to the field and new to living up north. So I really cherish these opportunities to learn from folks like Joseph and Cyril, as well as Doug, and kind of be in the middle of it. And I've learned so much from all of them already. So I'm just really grateful, and by everyone participating today, like we're all learning together, and just gotta keep moving forward. So.
And Doug. Oh, Joseph, sorry.
Yeah, I'd just like to see more cameras put into camps around the area, and work with researchers, work with the communities to do more work on sightings on the cameras in the summer, and when there's nobody around them. So, and it was good to be here listening to the other folks, how they do the work research. So I'd like to see a research be done on things that are neither coming in, like half-breeds and grizzly bears or even wolverines that never been around. They start sighting them around, so it would be good to have those cameras around so that we could see them. And thank you very much for letting me be part of that group today. Thank you.
Oh, I think it's our thanks going to you for joining us today, Joseph. We really appreciate your insights. Doug, do you have some final thoughts you'd like to wrap up with?
I'm happy to see Joseph have the last word. Konolu, Joseph. The world needs a lot more working together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you very much too.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you to all of our panelists. It's been a fascinating discussion. Really, really interesting. We really appreciate you all joining us and kicking off this first session of 2021.